Our first speaker is Alex Cunliffe, who is the founder of Aria Impressions, and she'll be speaking about creating personalized children's books with generative AI. And before I give the floor to Alex, she has mentioned that she is willing to take questions both during her presentation and at the end. So we're going to leave time at the end, but if you do have a question during, let us know. We do have some room monitors who will be looking for that. Thanks. Alex?
Great. Thank you for the introduction. All right, so I'm so happy to be here talking with you all today. Is sound okay? You can all hear me? Okay, perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and just dive right in. So I'll start with a little bit about me. My name is Alex Cunliffe. I hope you'll find me on LinkedIn. I'd love to connect with any of you. I've been in the machine learning space for the last 15 years, and I think one of the nice things about being in machine learning is I've got to work across a lot of different domains and different technologies. I think it's something kind of cool about this field. So I started off with a PhD from the University of Chicago in medical physics. So there I was looking at CT scans, so a lot of like image processing work to predict disease outcomes. I then moved to 3M, so my first job as a data scientist was at 3M. It's why I moved to Minnesota. And there I was doing some really cool work to use 3D scans of people's teeth to design orthodontic treatment. So really fun to be in the 3D space. There's some cool stuff going on there. I then moved on to the startup space. So I've always been interested in startups, and the first startup I joined because I had the opportunity to work on transformers, work on NLP. This was a technology I'd never worked in before, didn't know anything about, and I thought the fact that a company was willing to hire me to learn something entirely new was really cool. So I joined that company, worked there for a few years, joined a second startup also in the NLP space, and of course like getting into LLMs and OpenAI, things like that at that second company. And then earlier this year, I started working as a machine learning engineer at a peer-to-peer banking app. But I'm not here to talk to you about any of these past companies. I'm here to talk to you about my own company, which is called Aria Impressions. And so at Aria Impressions, we're creating personalized storybooks for children. It's a concept that I came up with about a year and a half ago when thought like the technologies that existed were capable of making these things. And here's some examples of some of the books that I've created for children. And just kind of by the way, any pictures you see of kids here, I have permission from their parents and also, when applicable, the children to show their faces in this presentation. So this is an example of some of the stories that I've created for these children. I sell on Etsy currently, and over the past little over a year since being on Etsy, I've sold over 50 books. I've sold across 16 US states as well as a few Canadian provinces and growing. And I think there's probably a few different ways to gauge like the success of a very early stage company, but profitability seems like a good metric. And so I was profitable in 2023, and I'm on track to grow for 2024. So how does it work? So it starts with a customer will provide me with a story description, just like a brief description of the story they'd like to create for their child, as well as a few photographs of the child. I then use some generative AI technologies in order to write the stories according to those descriptions they gave, and also generate these like ultra customized illustrations of the child. Then there's kind of the physical part where I assemble the layout and then use a third-party printer to print, bind, and ship the books. So it's a technology conference, a data science conference, so I'll talk a bit about the technologies that I'm using to create these books. So first, you probably won't be surprised to hear that the stories are created with the help of LLMs. And so in this example, I've asked ChatGPT to write me a children's story about a data scientist who dreams of bigger and better things, and like shout out to OpenAI that my data scientist is a woman, without me doing any further prompting, so like good for OpenAI. And then the illustration technology, I think, is a really interesting, like surprisingly simple concept, but very interesting technology called Dream Booth. So using Dream Booth, you can see this is the paper that was originally published in 2022 on Archive. And given a few input images, you're fine-tuning a diffusion model in order to learn like the representation of that image, and then using that fine-tuned model, you can generate that character in a bunch of different settings. And so the way it works, again, I'm going to use a figure from this paper to explain it. The way it works is you start with, like I said, a few input images. So in this example, they're taking input images of this dog here. And the objective of the fine-tuning process is to teach this diffusion model about an entirely new species of dog called a open bracket V closed bracket dog. And this is a whole new category. The model probably has no early knowledge about this because it doesn't really exist in the world. And so during fine-tuning, you're saying, when I show you pictures of a open bracket V closed bracket dog, that looks like this. It has this representation. But then what you don't want to happen during fine-tuning is you don't want it to basically overfit to like this specific pose of this dog, the specific background, those kinds of things. So in order to balance that out, the model has like a secondary objective, which is a class-specific prior, where it's saying, by the way, the V dog fits into this broader category dog, and dogs are allowed to have lots of different poses, lots of different backgrounds. They can chase frisbees. They can do all different kinds of things. And so that helps preserve this general like idea and keeps it from specifically overfitting to like a profile photo of a dog. And then there's been, since Dream Booth came out, there's been some really nice improvements to the technique. And so one of the major improvements was a bigger, better model. So SDXL stands for Stable Diffusion XL. It's a very high quality text-to-image model that was published by Stability AI, and it allows you to create very like high resolution images through that technology. And then you can combine that with a fine-tuning strategy called LoRA, which is low rank adaptation. And so LoRA is a way to efficiently fine-tune models by taking a really large, like dense weight matrix, decomposing it into 2 low-rank matrices, and then doing your fine-tuning on those like low-rank matrices. So it's a much more efficient strategy for fine-tuning. So I started off building this technology just using like plain old Dream Booth and some smaller, older models. And the image I'm showing on the left is like a pretty decent result from this. The image on the right, on the other hand, is using this SDXL plus LoRA approach. And so I think you can see the differences in like the image resolution is much better. And then some other things that like I don't notice, but my daughter definitely does when I read these books to her, is some of these ones, they put some like kind of crazy artifacts in the back. Like my daughter's very disturbed by this yellow orb with a pole, the umbrella in the ocean. Like these are things that kids notice that adults don't always notice, but the kids are like, what is that? Okay, so that's the technologies that I'm using, but kind of my takeaway from this is I think for me, for the company that I'm building, the technology is not the differentiator. So I think any AI practitioner would be able to take these technologies. A lot of them are open source. They're available for use. There's a lot of guidance. There's a lot of communities, and many examples of folks applying these technologies to create like interesting pictures of cats, or parents who are on Reddit saying, I've run out of ideas for stories for my children. What are some good prompts that I can use to prompt ChatGPT to give me like a good story? So I think that in itself is not the differentiator. Instead, what I'm doing is I'm building a mass customization manufacturing process in order to efficiently create these beautiful, ultra-personalized stories at a price point that people can actually afford. You know, like I said, I think any of you could go create one of these stories for your own families, your own children. They would love it. It would probably take a really long time, a lot of curation, a lot of kind of back and forth and iteration. And so what I'm building is this manufacturing pipeline that would allow me to efficiently produce really high quality, really personalized stories. And also present them as a better alternative to the really like uninspiring, mind-numbing, personal avatar stories that make your kid look like Coco Melon, like if you've ever seen that TV show. It's just these completely non-personalized, template, boring stories that I don't really think relate to children or to the parents who have to read them these stories. Okay, so now I'd like to talk a little bit about launching my business. So I had kind of a general idea. I played a little bit with the technology. I thought, hey, this could be something. And so the first thing that I did is I made a list of all of the things that I should do. and I should probably finish everything on this list until I get to ultimately selling books, the goal. And so I should probably, build the technology. I should name my company. Ooh, I should register an LLC. I should make a website. I should think about like what platform I should use to sell. I should open a company bank account, right? So I put down this whole list of things. And then I thought, it might be a good idea to check in with a friend who's done this before. So I called a friend of mine. Her name is Zeba. She has a company where she's making these beautiful wooden trellises for plants. And I called her and said, okay, like, how should I do my website design? How should I make this all like really appeal to people? And she gave me some great advice, which was stop. Like, do not do any of this, because the biggest risk that you're taking is that nobody wants to buy these books. And so before you do any of these other things, like first get educated, like read some books about starting a company, and then second, just start selling. Like as fast as you can, start selling and answer that question, is there demand at all for your product? And so with that being said, I kind of crossed off everything else on my list. I made some pretty awful business cards. I put stuff on Etsy, and I started selling books. So I think from like concept to selling my first book was maybe like a couple months. And so this kind of brings the first lesson that I've learned from this so far, which, and I just want to say, I'm going to say some takeaways. I don't think these are new ideas about starting a company, but say they're the ones that so far have worked well for me. And so I'm trying to distill down like the thousands of different opinions to just a few. So the first is prioritize learning. And so there's a book called The Lean Startup that I thought was quite educational. And it says, this quotes, "The lesson of the MVP is that any additional work beyond what was required to start learning is a waste, no matter how important it might have seemed at the time." And so that's something that I think I've really taken to heart. And as a person with a background in science and machine learning, like I'm good at experiments. I really like running experiments, seeing how they play out, assuming that I have a hypothesis, but I don't really know if it's true until I've proven it out. Okay, so my first question that I tried to answer, the first learning that I had is like, who is my actual customer? And I actually originally had a hypothesis that my customer would be folks who are buying books as gifts for grandparents. So, or gifts for grandparents or aunts or uncles or parents. So in this case, it would be, the target customer would be parents of small children who were trying to give a book to their parents as a gift. And this is a shot of one of the first books that I made was for my grandmother as a gift from her great-granddaughter to her. And my grandma got it, and she cried, and it was very sentimental, and I thought, oh great, I'm really onto something. So I think the challenge with this market, right, is that this is an entirely new product category. Like memory books for grandparents is not a known product. The market doesn't exist because it's not something that's in the space. Because the market doesn't exist, there's like zero demand for this product. So along with creating the product itself, I would have to create the market. I'd have to educate people about why they need this thing that they didn't even know that they needed. And even when you do that, you're relying a lot on the early adopters, the people who are willing to take the risk and buy something that's completely new, as opposed to just get a mug with a photo of the kid on it instead. Personalized children's books, on the other hand, are a very well-known product category. So while no one was making the exact product that I was offering, the general concept of a personalized book, you can find plenty of examples on Amazon, on Etsy. When I was a kid, I had one of these books that just had my name in it and my little brother's name. So this is a very familiar space. People go online knowing that they want to buy a personalized book for their kids. So I decided the first thing I'd do is I'd run an experiment. I would list both, and then I would see what actually sold. And so I put both of the listings up. I targeted them to different audiences, and chatted with friends, tried to see what would happen. And the way it's played out is, maybe not so surprisingly, the overwhelming majority of my orders have been for children's books. So that was a incredibly useful learning. It helped me prioritize and say, all right, I'm not going to sell two products. I'm going to sell one product, and I'm going to sell the product that currently is an easier product for me to sell. Okay, so the next bit of advice that's worked well for me is to be not quite cutting edge. And so in this space, like I get this sometimes too, where you look on LinkedIn or you looked on X or like any kind of platform, and you think that you're totally missing out on the latest and greatest amazing thing that was published last week and has transformed the entire industry. And say, like, while that can sometimes be true, it's also good to keep in mind that cutting edge technology, it's imperfect. It hasn't really stood any test of time, and so people don't know what the issues are going to be. It's also buggy. Like, there's often a lot of issues. If you look on their GitHub, a lot of active issues that are being worked on in the community. And then the people who are building this cutting edge technology usually have access to a lot of compute. And so it's also often quite expensive to run, very resource intensive. So I think instead it's worked well for me to stay abreast of the latest and greatest, the newest research, and kind of keep an eye towards things that I might want to use in the future, but selectively adopt new technologies once they've been hardened, once they've stood a little bit of the test of time. So an example of this is I showed that I'm now primarily using this SDXL plus LoRa approach for fine-tuning. But that wasn't the case to start. Instead, so kind of the timeline around, I was using Dreambooth. And then last summer, Stability AI put out a press release saying, we are about to release this new model. It's going to be cutting edge. It's available for non-commercial use. Like, important there, non-commercial use, I cannot use it to sell products. And then, to make things even better, the first author of the Dreambooth paper, I saw this on X, and so I thought, okay, seems like something I should try. So at that point, I paid for the expensive compute, and I started looking at what's the quality of the images, what are the current issues, that kind of a thing. Didn't do anything with it then. And then about a month and a half later, Stability AI released a new press release saying, okay, we have our 1.0 version of this model. It is available for commercial use. And the nice thing about this too is in the interim time between the 0.9 and the 1.0 model, the wonderful open source community had worked to make this model fine-tunable on small compute instances, kind of like the gold standard of small compute, which is a free tier Google Colab instance. And so at that point, it was kind of ready for me to start selling, and so I sold my first book shortly afterwards. Okay, and then my final takeaway message for me anyway is I personally have never been someone who's worked 80-hour weeks, worked very long hours. It's something that just hasn't worked well for me because I've found that in this field, the number of hours you work does not correlate with how successful your product is and how successful your technology is. It's just, all of this is experimental, all of this is unknown, and it's more important to make the right choices rather than really pound away at something that, if you really took a step back and thought about it, isn't likely to work. And so for this company, I'm trying to prioritize the things that matter right now. Think about the rest, but don't stress, don't worry about the rest, and know that I'll get to it when the time is right, when I've already crossed off the way more important questions to answer. Prioritize the learnings that are important now, not the learnings that are important in the future. And so for 2023, I set 2 priorities for my company. So the first was technical viability, what does the end-to-end process look like? Does it work? Does it work well enough that you'll actually be able to recognize the children that are in these storybooks? And then also the customer understanding. So what I talked about before, is there a demand for this product at the price point? Who is my target audience that I'm selling to? And so that's all I worked on in 2023, was answering these 2 questions. And I did not think about the influencer market. I didn't think about my website, which is still pretty bad. I'm only focusing on these 2 things. And I had, especially during the holidays in 2023, that's where things started to take off. And so I was able to answer those questions. Okay, there is a demand from customers. The response has been very positive. This is something that people do want to buy. Okay, so then I had to think about priorities for 2024. And so I thought carefully about this because the first thing that happened in 2024 is I had a bit of a disruption to my company. And that was that my second daughter was born in February of 2024. So I went into 2024 knowing, I'm not going to have the time, nor do I want to spend the time away from my newborn child. I really want to be able to prioritize her and prioritize getting to know her. So for 2024, I set a single goal, which is efficiency and profitability. So this entire year, I've been working on anticipating, okay, there is a demand. The holidays are going to be a lot, and so it's important for me to answer the question, can I build these books efficiently enough that it's actually profitable? Like, can I decrease the time investment? So when I take my own time or the time of maybe future employees into account, is this something that can continue to be profitable? And so to kind of tell you what this looks like, so my first book that I made was an R&D effort. It took days of working hours. I think it went 3 iterations with my customer, which is great because my customer was a family member, so they were very patient with me as I iterated with them to figure out what was working. During the holidays of 2023, I was able to make the process significantly more efficient, so maybe like 4 to 6 hours per book. That's still way too long. I had a lot of late nights. And then also learned a lot more about customer service, shipping delays, kind of dealing with all the rest of the things apart from making a physical book. Currently, I've been doing a lot to kind of streamline the process this year now that I know the process really well, now that I've done it manually so many times. And currently it's dramatically reduced, and this holiday season will sort of be the test of, have I made it efficient enough that I should continue? All right, so I'm gonna get into, I'm almost done, but I'll talk a little bit about some of the current technical challenges that I'm facing as well as opportunities. So one of the technical challenges is for these generative AI models, like they're super useful and efficient, but there is sometimes a lack of adherence to prompts, both for the text LLM and also for the Stable Diffusion model. And so if I'm writing a story about a child who goes for a ride on a unicorn, it's like pretty important that I have a picture of the child riding a unicorn, not a child riding a unicorn without a horn, which is a horse, and not a child standing next to a unicorn. And so it is a little bit of like an art and a science to try to control that prompting. And then there are also deviations from reality. So I think the idea of people having extra fingers, right? This baby has 6 fingers. So that is a familiar downside to these models, which is absolutely getting better. T-Rexes also don't have 3 legs, which is over here. And then there's also this maybe even broader issue with the modifications that are sometimes made to a child's appearance. So here I'm showing, this is my daughter on the left, my second baby, and on the right is this picture of her, which is like a spitting image of her, except with long hair. And that's not realistic for an 8-month-old baby. And so I can't use those kinds of things. And then finally, I think one of my top requested features, and something I think would improve the books quite a bit, is if I could incorporate multiple characters in the same, or train a model on multiple characters and incorporate them in the same image. And right now there's this twinning effect that will often happen, where the fine-tuned model has learned so much about the subject of interest that every person that is generated in an image will just be a twin of that person. So on the left here is my daughter, on the right here is a like spitting image of my daughter with brown hair. And I think the prompt here was like her giving another child a hug, and instead she's giving herself a hug. Okay, so that being said, I think these are still kind of exciting technical opportunities, and they're things that either I'm working on or being worked on in the community as well. And it is just so cool to see the books that are being generated, the kind of imagination, both from the people who order the books and kind of like all of us working together to make these beautiful stories. So I think my favorite one has been this one on the right, which is a little girl who is a pickle princess, and she saves her kingdom from a pickle-loving dragon. I think you aren't going to get this level of personalization without the AI in the loop. And the reviews also for my company have been like overwhelmingly positive. People telling me that it's the best present their kid got for Christmas. It's something they can't wait to order more books. They're going to get one for every person in their family. And so it's been just an amazing reception where, yeah, it's nice to make something and you kind of worry, like, is this going to work? And then people are saying it's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And you think, okay, like, thank goodness it worked. All right, so then kind of my last takeaway is it's definitely scary to start something new. It's also been just like overwhelmingly amazing to create something that's your own, build it from scratch. And I think it's so cool that we're living in such a neat time where AI can help create something like a book, a physical, real book where a kid can see themselves, they can enjoy reading, and it builds this like really nice connection between the kid and the adult who is reading it to them. So I'm ending with this picture, which is me surprising my daughter at her school on her birthday to read her a book that was made specifically for her, and just kind of seeing the smiles of her and all the kids. It's a very cool thing. So that's all I've got, and I would love to take questions or comments. Thank you.
I'm super interested in like the business side of things, but one question that I had for you, you mentioned you're trying to make the process more and more efficient. Are you exploring or using any kind of, we'll say point and click or consumer automation tools like make.com or Zapier, things like that to speed up the process? If not, what are you doing to create more efficiency?
Yeah, so I'm currently no, I'm not using those kinds of things. I've thought about building some tools that would make it more of a UI focus. I also say right now I'm very careful about the third-party tools that I use. I don't want to upload pictures of people's children to third-party companies, and so that's something too. I'm not using like image APIs to generate pictures of these children. So that's something that I'm thinking about a lot with this. That would probably make me shy away from third-party tools.
Alex, we have a couple of questions from online attendees, and the first one actually dovetails with what you just talked about. So this is an anonymous question. Do you guarantee the safety for the images of the child, i.e. they aren't available through the AI to others? How is this done?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's kind of one of the first things that I thought about. It's really important to me. I don't want to be uploading images of minors to third-party companies, and so it's something where I am fine-tuning the models myself on like compute instances from trusted sources. I'm not sending the data to third-party companies, and yeah. I'd love to know if that answers the question of the person online too, because it's definitely something that I'm like it's top of mind. So.
Hi, congratulations on your success. This is amazing work. My question almost...
I think actually, sorry, I think the microphone might, I don't know if it's on.
Can you hear me all right now?
Yes, yeah.
Perfect. So I think you almost answered my question, but at the same time, I know that GPT-4 and other things are also using the images as an input. So have you tried computing on your own local system to fine-tune the system with the images and try to create like stories, not just with the description, but also with the images and probably kid holding its own toy and try to get stories out of it? Have you tried something of that sort?
Yeah, I think that that's something that's definitely a possibility. I'm not uploading images to GPT-4 for the same reason of I'm not sending images of kids to OpenAI. But I think that would be a logical next step to have the image and text kind of in the model together. Right now, it's very much a back and forth process, I think, where it's like story images. So, yeah.
Okay, another question from an online attendee. This question comes from Jimmy. What techniques are you using for quality control of the AI-generated images or text? For example, how are you ensuring that the story is something appropriate to the child's age before printing the book?
Yeah, so that's another thing where currently that's a very manual process. It's something where I'm reviewing every single book. I think that it's never something that I don't see it as being something that you would ever really want to take the human out of the loop entirely, just because it's so high stakes. You want to make sure that you get this right. But that's, I think, towards the efficiency side, I'm thinking more and more about using AI tools to like filter down the set of images, identify issues, kind of using that in order to do some of the quality assurance before the final human check. But I don't want the human check to go away, at least at this point.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for the presentation. It's so interesting. I was curious, how many images do you typically need for training, and if the model can generate like profile views without profile view pictures, or do you need pictures like that for training?
Yeah. So the question was like, how many images do typically need, and can it generate things like profile views, things that are not like specifically a picture of a child smiling in front of it. And so I ask folks to upload between 5 and 10 pictures. That if they do that, that's great. A lot of times folks will send me 2 or 3, and it's still reasonably successful with just a few images. And then, yeah, I have found that it can extrapolate to different poses, side views, the child doing things like flying or things that they were certainly not in the original images. So, yeah.
Hi, so first, congratulations. I think your idea is amazing. My question is more in the business part. Is there any, a part where you mention any good advice that you'll give to young entrepreneurs that are starting their journey in the AI business part?
Yeah, well, I mean, in some ways, maybe I'm not young anymore, but I'm definitely new to starting my own business. And so for me, it's really been just the best way to learn something is to do it. And so for me, also a lot of doing this is to learn how to do it and to learn all the components that I wasn't even thinking about that go into starting your own business. And yeah, I think I could read a bunch of books, but I would never get the benefit of just doing it myself.
We have another online question. This question comes from F. What future trends do you foresee in the intersection of generative AI and children's literature? And how do you think these will shape the reading experiences of the next generation?
Well, that's a big question. And I would probably want some like authors and folks in that space to be involved in that answer. I guess I'll speak specifically to what I'm doing right now. I'm in addition to being conscious about privacy and making sure that like children's photos are not uploaded to the internet, I'm also conscious about I don't want to do things that like artists and authors are able to do themselves. And so for me specifically, I'm building these books are not something that would be worth a author's time to put the time and effort into generating their own specific books. I still think there's a really good place for people building beautiful literature. I guess what I'm trying to say is I don't think ChatGPT is going to write all the books in the world. I hope not, because that's a different thing. That's art, and yeah.
Hi there. Can you hear me? Mm-hmm. Okay, great. I have a question about the images. How did you keep the consistency same throughout? Kind of talking about artistic sense as well. Did you ask to do it in a certain artist style, or how are you keeping that consistent throughout the books?
Yeah. There's a few different ways I've looked into. So prompting is like you said, I think a very powerful way for ensuring consistent style. And then there's also some work on kind of combining style trained models with personalization trained models. That's another area that I've been looking into. So I guess a few different ways, I guess, would be my answer. Yeah.
Any more questions?
Hi. So I have a question. Going back to the answer you gave just prior about artists and working with artists and it not being worth their time. As artists are seeing an impact to their profitability and their work with AI sort of taking away jobs or not being able to produce as fast as AI is producing, do you have any plans to sort of help work with artists, authors, or communities that are being impacted by this rapid pace of technology when they're trying to just make sure they know what that is,
yeah,
the next thing that's up? Yeah.
Absolutely. So it's something that at the current point, I believe I am not profitable enough to bring other people on board and pay them a living wage, but it's something that I'm thinking about. So I'm moving into kind of doing a little bit more of not templated stories, but some more like predictable storylines and things like that. And for that, I've thought about hiring authors to bring them on to help me like build those stories that are going to be repeated and used kind of throughout. So that's something that I really hope to be able to do. Just need to like be a little bit more profitable first before I can take on more employees.
Do we have any last questions? We're right at time. All right. Thank you very much. That's great, Alex.